Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, honorable panelists, Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister of Australia, Foreign Minister of Nepal, ladies and gentlemen, and to my Indian friends and audience, ये मुलाकात एक बहाना है, प्यार का सिलसिला पुराना है. It's not my first time being here before. Well, the theme of the second Raisina conference, which I had the honor of attending last year too, this year is of immense significance. Noting the changing world and the emergence of new powers, new superpowers. And as the Prime Minister of India, Honorable Modi just said earlier, this is the century of Asia. For we have in Asia two new superpowers emerging, China and India, and also the re-emergence of an old superpower, Russia. The new normal, multilateralism, multipolarity. Well, I come from a country that is too poor, too small, but somehow for centuries it has been engaged with all these big powers. We don't know why we attract them all. From Great Britain to the Tsarist Russia, then to the Soviet Union, the United States, and of course, you remember the past 40 years, to 2002, where Afghanistan once again was the center of world's attention. Now here's what differentiates 19th century and 20th century from the 21st century multipolarity and the emergence of rivalries and or cooperation. We have the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Rudd here with us, who is very familiar with Afghanistan, who served his country while his country's troops were serving in Afghanistan. We have the Minister of State of India, Mr. M.J. Akbar, whose country, India, our good friend, has been at the forefront of assistance to Afghanistan, and we are very, very grateful in providing all that we need in the whole spectrum of assistance, from education to dams to electricity. Prime Minister Modi refers to that in very eloquent words. And as I began, we attract these big powers. And in 2002, we attracted these big powers for a cause that we all embraced. The cause of freedom for Afghanistan and the cause of peace for the world and stability for the world, away from terrorism and extremism and radicalism that hurt us all the way to the Twin Towers in America and the loss of life elsewhere. I witnessed that. I happened to become the president of the country at that time for another 13 years. And I witnessed how multipolarity worked in Afghanistan and how multilateral interaction took between competing interests in Afghanistan. And as you all remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we began, Afghanistan had nothing. It was a debilitated, destroyed state. Nothing there that you could call in the form of a government or functions of a state. The world, the West, led by the United States, and the rest of the world, major powers, all joined hands. In the initial days of my government, I didn't have the means to travel abroad. So the US would take the Afghan president on their Air Force planes, Air Force Two in my case. The Russians would send their government plane to take me to Moscow. Competing powers, Russia and America. Very competing powers. China would fly me from Japan to Beijing, and from Beijing to Tajikistan. Saudi Arabia would send their own special plane, in Iran the same way. And we saw a wonderful example of multipolarity at work, at multilateral dimensions of cooperation. The Indians gave us thousands of scholarships. The Americans built us roads. The Russians supplied us helicopters. The Chinese helped us in recreating our canal systems. Japan gave us billions of dollars and hosted the first conference in Tokyo. Iran was supportive of the US action in Afghanistan. The US accepted Iran's interests in Afghanistan. The Saudis built part of the roads that the Americans were building for us. And Pakistan too wanted to contribute in spite of India's presence there. Now, this is what we desire for the whole of the world. And this is what we had in Afghanistan from 2002 till very recently. Do we have the same today in Afghanistan? Unfortunately, no. Is it disappearing? Yes, it is. I remember 2009, 10, 11, 12, as we were negotiating with the United States our bilateral security agreement. Once I complained to President Putin, whom I highly admire for bringing Russia back to the world stage in a significant way. American friends shouldn't mind me saying this. I told President Putin that I had worries about Afghanistan, that the way the United States and our Western allies are conducting the war on terror is not leading us to less extremism in our region or in Afghanistan, that we see rising extremism in spite of this massive sacrifice of life and resources by our friends, including Australia and Canada, Prime Minister Harper sitting there, and by our other allies, and also the Afghan people. And you know what President Putin told me? He said, President Karzai, this is 2008, 9, 10. I mean, I've been repeating my message repeatedly during those years. He told me, President Karzai, we and the United States have differences of views on things in many parts of the world. But in Afghanistan, we see eye to eye, and we are helping them. So we have allowed NATO to transport their goods through Russian territory to Afghanistan. And as we were preparing for the Afghan Loya to discuss whether we should sign the bilateral security agreement with America or not, I happened to twice or thrice visit Beijing, both during the office of President Hu Jintao and also during the office of the current President Xi Jinping. And discussing the Afghan-American arrangement, China did not oppose it, ladies and gentlemen. The Chinese said, well, if it suits your security and if it's bringing you security, we are for it. Go ahead and sign it. I would show hesitation. They would show support against my hesitation. India, of course, encouraged me, both the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and the current Prime Minister Modi, to sign the bilateral security agreement with America. The Saudis the same way. So we saw this massive cooperation of a multipolar world with varying interests in multilateral forms in Afghanistan, which I at that time, in my early days of government, called the cooperation of civilizations. We had a Muslim country joining hand with the Buddhist country, Japan, to build segments of highways in Afghanistan. We had the Christian world and the Muslim world joining hands to build other parts of Afghanistan. We had a Hindu state mainly, and Muslims and Christians and others joining hands in China, helping us to build Afghanistan. It sounds almost wishful, as I can see you're looking at me like that. Well, what's he talking about? That was true, it happened. Why don't we have it today? Look at Syria, look at Iraq, look at the differences, look where Turkey has gone away from the traditional allies. Look at the concerns of Russia, look at the concerns of China, look at the concerns of India. Earlier the Prime Minister spoke about extremism, terrorism, and the use of it, and the dangers it poses to us all. The prolongation of the so-called war against terror, not showing results, having more negative consequences. So when we work for a cause and the time frame is long and not limited to datelines, we come to where we are today. My hope is, ladies and gentlemen, that the new normal will not be a conflictful multilateral world, but that the new normal will be a cooperative multilateral world, as we saw in Afghanistan from 2002 till very recently. Thank you very much.